Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give a brief sort of tech grounding and explanation before we get started. Welcome to this PASUP event, and someone will give a further introduction. But before that, we are recording this. So just so you know and are aware, this meeting is being recorded. And if you are unfamiliar with Zoom or need a refresher, if you're not speaking, please put your microphone on mute. That way we're not hearing any background noises, etc. For the most part, our panelists and moderator will be the ones speaking for this, but we will have some opportunity for audience interaction. But we'd ask that you please direct questions or comments while people are speaking to the chat so that it doesn't interrupt the flow, and we'll try to get those addressed. If you don't know how to mute, if you move your cursor down to the bottom of the window, you should see a little toolbar pop up with several icons on it, one of which is the microphone, so you can hit that for muting yourself. If you would like to express anything during the event, also there's Zoom reactions, and they can let you do things like applause. So if you want to try to give some feedback, even if your camera is off, you can use those reactions to give feedback as our panelists and moderators are speaking. I think that's all I'm going to share regarding Zoom tech. Does anyone have any questions, tech questions, before we get started? Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So make sure you've recorded that pasupnow.org URL. We'll share it again at the end. That way we can go ahead and move on to the panel.
I think before we do that, I'm just going to give a brief intro on PASUP as an organization. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with us, but I think I saw in the chat that this is some people's first introduction to us as an organization, so welcome. You have our website, pasupnow.org. If you want to get more information about what we're doing, please go there so you can get on the mailing list and hear about the events that we're putting on. What we do as a community group is to create, and this is our mission, create greater awareness of the dangers of single-use plastic, and also support the efforts of individuals and groups acting against single-use plastic. Also advocating for cleaner and greener solutions to plastic dependence. We try to have, and this was a little bit interrupted as most things were in March of last year, but we're getting back into a swing of things now, having some kind of meeting every month to work on either taking steps to educate, to work on possibilities with legislation and what we can do with that, work on our communities and institutions where we can reduce single-use plastics in our daily lives as people who live in this city, as well as just working together to get as much good information out there as we can and to support other individuals and other groups who are doing the same. So for example, this was on the slide that Sabrina had up, our Recycle This Pittsburgh website is one of our projects that's a really good intro to plastic reduction, because it starts with something that people are mostly already doing, just might not know as much about. So it's definitely worth checking out, it has some really good information on there. But our website, pasupnow.org, also has a little bit more information on it. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that we have an email contact for me in the chat as well.
Let's see, is it my turn now? Hello?
Yes, you're on, Ed.
All right. Thanks to everyone who made this event possible, especially and including those who are attending. And I'm glad people are using the chat. Please, especially any candidates or candidate staff, please introduce yourselves in the chat. And this is an opportunity for everyone to work cooperatively rather than be, in the blood sport of politics. We're encouraging brainstorming after the panel. And we're going to be addressing a topic that to me has gotten very little interest, which is having political campaigns focus on being environmentally responsible themselves. I've searched this, and the only two references I came up with were from North Vancouver, British Columbia, and India, to be honest. We hope this event will be a springboard for wider discussion. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit with ample opportunity, not only for win-win, but for win-win-win and more win, I think, for various people. First, we wish to raise awareness of the environmental harm from political campaigns, which I'm sure is something you're all likely aware of, including gasoline used, campaign signs, multiple mailers, food and beverage waste, and the universal swag. Second, we will focus on what actually wins elections, which is often not what people are used to doing. Third, the obvious leap from this is to eliminate things that are not cost effective, especially if they are harmful to the environment, and also to explore the greenest possible options for things that are used, such as trying to find the least impactful yard signs, etc. Fourth, we want to point out the self-defeating hypocrisy of modeling poor environmental stewardship, especially, I think, our pet peeve of candidates drinking water from single-use plastic water bottles during debates and at other public appearances. And we are working on a video which is going to have a supposed environmental champion doing all the wrong things in practice. Fifth, we want to help pro-environmental candidates and pro-environmental organizations to formulate winning strategies, taking advantage of their environmental stewardship. And sixth, we want to broaden this discussion to state, national, and even international levels. And finally, we hope that candidates will take these messages to heart after they win, so that they'll continue to act in such a way as to be consistent with their environmental statements and values. Now on to our moderator and distinguished panel. Let's see, let me see is Lucas on yet, by the way? Lucas Becerra, can anybody tell me? Well, first we'll start with our moderator. Laura Putnam is a research professor in the Department of History at our favorite, at least for me, where my daughter goes, the University of Pittsburgh. And she writes on political and social movements in local, regional, and transnational contexts. And I found her work on the potential for grassroots elected party committees, members, and other engaged citizens to be particularly insightful and inspiring. Lucas, I hope he'll join us. Becerra is an organizer, campaign manager, and communication practitioner in our area with experience in ballot initiatives and numerous local and Pennsylvania state contexts.
Not yet here.
I tried calling him. I'll try again. He takes a conservation-centered approach to campaigning where possible and actively looks for ways to eliminate waste in campaigns. And we've had a couple of wonderful discussions about this. Sarah Innamorato, 21st District, Pennsylvania State Congress member, is guided by a mission, leveling the playing field to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have equal access to opportunities to lead a life with dignity. She advocates for transparency and reform in Harrisburg. Thank you very much. And including for clean air and water. She has empowered other women candidates. Her business experience includes having launched her own company, Inamo Co. And she shares my interest in community gardening. Moses Nelson has a master's degree in political science from George Washington University in DC and has experience in political campaigns beginning in 2007 with Barack Obama, if you've ever heard of him. Since then, he has worked on and run many campaigns at all levels of government, most recently helping underdog presidential candidate Andrew Yang as his South Carolina field director, and presently is managing the Ed Gainey mayoral campaign. Skylar Schaefer got his start working for Next Gen Climate, a PAC dedicated to youth voter registration and turnout and messaging on the importance of voting with climate issues in mind. The many candidates he has helped include Emily Kincaid, Bobby Wilson, Frank Dermody, and our final panelist, Erica Strasburger, and he is currently Bill Peduto's campaign manager. Erica Strasburger worked for many years as an environmental advocate and community organizer with Penn Environment. In 2018, she was elected as the first woman to hold the District 8 City Council seat, which makes her my Pittsburgh City Council person. And she's great. She's taken on several important challenges, including leading the charge to modernize Pittsburgh's waste and recycling code and fighting against privatization of our drinking water. She is currently running for re-election. And take it away, Professor Putnam. That way I don't have to pronounce your first name.
Great. So it's wonderful to be here, and my gratitude to the organizers, and it's great to be here with such an interesting and involved range of people. So I thought we can start off by hearing from each of our panelists, maybe about 4 or 5 minutes each, so that we then have time for dialogue and questions, if that works for you all.
Sadly, I just got a note from Lucas Becerra, who said that he was in some sort of an accident while going around collecting campaign signatures. So let's, of course, hope that it was nothing serious.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, so we'll, I think if we can, let's start, if it'll work for you all, let's start with about 4 or 5 minutes each. We can go in the order of the announcement that I saw. So that'll be Representative Innamorato, then Council Member Strasburger, and then Moses, and then Schuyler. And then we'll move into more of an open discussion, if that works for you. And I think you're all bringing such wonderful perspectives from having run different successful campaigns using a variety of techniques that's a lot more creative than and really engaged. So you all will have quite different perspectives to bring. Representative Innamorato, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I guess I just want to kind of ground us in the fact that it's really hard to run for office. There are a lot of structural barriers that exist because there are certain political structures that exist. There's also, we have ever yawning income inequality, so people don't have the resources or time to be able to see themselves in government, and folks, we don't have governing bodies that are reflective of the people that they serve. So it is hard to imagine folks seeing themselves in public office. So, we're already fighting an uphill battle. And oftentimes it's hard to raise money to run, especially an insurgent campaign. So, you're always looking for ways to do things cost effectively that get your name out there. So, I do want to say that you will see, if you can get greater access to running for public office, you will have people who then can have a conversation on what it's like to be more sustainable in that process. I know for us, we really tried to look on how we could reuse yard signs year over year, and kind of did a lot of the basic stuff. But I think really what wins campaigns is being able to talk to the people who are going to eventually go to a voting booth and vote for you. And that requires a lot of community energy. It involves a lot of organizing and power building from the grassroots on up. And so I think that if we do want to see more sustainable campaigns, it does fall on the individual who is running, and also it falls on us as citizens to say who is running for office, who's reflecting my values, and how do I volunteer for them? How do I get on the phone, make phone calls? How do I send text messages? How do I do the thing that maybe isn't using any plastic at all, but does result in a way to meaningfully connect with individuals. So it really is a community effort. And I just want to make sure that we're rooting ourselves with the fact that we don't have, that it's really difficult to run for office, that environmentalism is different than environmental justice. And we do have to think about the other structural barriers like classism, racism, ableism, all the other isms that prevent people from running for office, and how that barrier is not only a barrier to run for office, but potentially have access to resources that are sustainable, and thinking through that lens. So I look forward to the conversation we're going to have this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Councilmember Strasburger, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I want to thank Representative Innamorato for grounding us in that way, because I think it's you know, in the ideal world, we would come up with a system to support sustainable campaigns in the way that we are talking about them. I'd also love to be able to dovetail into a conversation about other types of sustainable campaigns, not just in the way that we're thinking about today, but how do we sustain a movement over time toward the ends that we really want. But in the way that we're initially starting to talk about that, you know, if there is a way that we can have a double win by using less, you know, plastic and paper that gets thrown away and those types of materials with the institutional support behind it, so each individual candidate isn't making up as they go along. I think that's, you know, the beginning of what we're seeing today, which is very exciting. When Ed Wren first approached me about this event, I told him a couple of anecdotes. One was, in my time at Penn Environment, I mostly worked on as a local and a national spokesperson and advocate to against fracking in Pennsylvania and against fracking across the country. And I appeared on at a panel discussion in Washington County with former councilman, he was then Councilman Doug Shields, and environmental advocate. And I left my reusable water bottle in my car. So on stage, as I got a little parched, I drank from the plastic water bottle that they gave me. And afterwards, both Doug Shields and I just got ripped apart by an audience member saying, how can you be railing against and trying to stop fracking in our communities and supporting the very industry that is partnering with fracking companies? And it was a good reminder that it's not all about the end game, it's about the process as well. And it's about the example and the standard that you lead and you set with, or that you set. Another anecdote is just that when I started with the organization I worked for, the overall organization I worked for back in the day, and we were at a training, a national training, you know, we had like, just as a cost cutting measure, we had like the day old bagels, we had the styrofoam cups, and some person raised the question of, well, why are we using styrofoam cups? We're working for, you know, a better, more sustainable world. And the answer was kind of means to an end. We're doing so much good in the policies we're working to pass that we need to kind of scrimp and save how we can. Of course, everyone knows, unfortunately, styrofoam is less expensive than the other alternatives out there. So that is something I think, you know, it was a worldview I believed in for a long time, but I've come to realize that it's about us not only changing our behavior for the sake of doing that because it's the best thing to do, but if you're in a position that is garnering a lot of public exposure, I guess we're going to see a video. It makes me a little nervous. I hope it's not of me, but of bad behavior, you know, of doing something that maybe isn't the best example in this regard. It can be powerful too. And then as a reminder, I always like to remind people who don't believe in the power of personal choice when it comes to having the privilege to make these decisions to be more sustainable, that sometimes making decisions around, you know, saving reusable containers or saving waste in this way or another is an on-ramp to bigger political action. And I think that's really important. Not everyone's going to be able to latch on to the political importance of something or be politicized right away. They need that sort of on ramp to that. And I think this is a really good way to do that in some cases, whether it's, you know, I saw Brian Bonsteel here, the No Plastics Please campaign, to other movements. You know, that could be the first step towards larger change that they're advocating for in their lives and in their spheres and circles. So I think those are the main things I wanted to get across at first, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. Moses, share your thoughts.
First, I want to say thank you to PASUP for putting this together. Thanks, Lara, for moderating. Sarah, Erica, Skylar, it's a privilege and an honor to share a stage, not a literal stage, but a stage nonetheless with you guys. I would say that for me, I think the majority of the work that I've done over the past, over a decade, has contributed to, I think, some of the issues that we have today. I think that we are, and when I say we, I mean me and other folks that have done the things that we've done on campaigns. I've contributed to this, and I've spent a lot of time trying to, right some of those misguided steps. In 2008, we were so happy after the election, and we didn't get back to the offices until maybe that Thursday. Right? We had the Wednesday off. We talked to then President-elect Obama on Wednesday about transitioning and then shutting down the state and doing the things that we needed to do. The campaign, like campaigns, spent a boatload of money, and we didn't have just your regular, 5x7 piece of lit. Like we literally had like books, like booklets, right, with pages and pages. And a standard box of lit now could have 10,000 pieces in it, right? We had boxes with 2,500 pieces because of the number of pages per piece. And when it was over, I was in Michigan, right? We're the battleground states see far more lit and campaign materials and swag and everything else than the average states, right? So Michigan and nearby Ohio, we just got a boatload of stuff. And after the election, it was everywhere, right? I mean, the stuff that we didn't get a chance to use, I mean, we're talking upwards amount of 30 to 40,000 pieces of lit. And so what I did, being somewhat of a leader, not high up on the food chain, but certainly in terms of cleaning the office, it's found a recycling, like a recycling plant or somewhere where we can take that stuff instead of just tossing it in the dumpster, right? Like the dumpster behind the building. And that was not me being necessarily environmentally friendly. I know that there was a component to it, but I'm from Connecticut, and the year prior, or the few years prior to, the city, New Haven, went into a new program called single-use or single-stream recycling, right? So now you don't have to combine paper from plastic, from bottles, from aluminum. You can literally put everything into one big giant bucket. And they supplied these buckets throughout the city, and a pamphlet, right, of sort of like the do's and don'ts, what to do and what not to do, and then also the impact, right? And so the impact that stayed with me and is with me today, I actually quoted it a few days ago, was that the city at the time can receive up to $40 per ton of recyclables. However, it cost them $80 per ton of rubbish, right, of garbage, right? And so that's one of the reasons why the recycling bins are or were larger than the garbage cans. And I'd like to think that that's the case today, in the sense that you can recycle far more than you throw away. Therefore, you need more space and the encouragement to do so. And my thought was that if we could take these 40,000 pieces of lead, and that's on the low end, right? Because we had upwards amount of 10 offices in the Detroit, Wayne County area in Michigan, far more. What kind of impact that can have just in terms of recycling? And so I think about these things somewhat in a vacuum and somewhat as an afterthought, right? Not so much as a forethought to say, before we purchase, what can we do, right? Our campaign just purchased 1,000-yard signs, and on the bottom, in small print, my apologies, I can't get it really any larger, but in small print it says, it requests that you recycle that bag, right? And so, I think that there's some emphasis placed on it. Sarah, I can't say it any better than you have, which is sometimes campaigns move so fast and things are happening almost at lightning speed, ordering and raising money and spending money and trying to get materials in so you can get them out, so that you can spread your message and do all the things that you need to do to win. In parts of the country, especially the parts that we're in, we want to make sure that we find things that are made or that are union made. Those things become, for every union print shop, there's probably 30 or 40 non-union print shops, right, with prices that are far cheaper, right? And so campaigns are faced with that decision, and then also the decision of how can we get these things in? How can we get them in faster? How can we not lose quality points or political points with supporters and things like that? And then to think about, okay, is this safe for the planet? Can we recycle these things? I'm afraid that that's an afterthought, and many times it's not thought about at all, right? Unfortunately, and so I think if there's ways that we can do better, we should definitely try to. I'm gonna end there and let Skylar go and kind of get into the discussion.
Great. Thank you. Skylar, share your thoughts.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. My thoughts are from the perspective of a campaign professional, and to echo a lot of other points here from Erica, Sarah, and Moses. Campaigns are extremely busy. And so you get people cutting corners. So it's important and I think leadership comes from the top down. It comes from the candidate, it comes from the campaign manager. And it's important for candidates to ask their staff to be cognizant, and then give their staff the ability to practice sustainability. And what does that look like? We have field staff, and you see a lot of waste in the field. You see, when I first started in campaigns, there was a lot of bottled water, and a lot of things like this. And now you see a lot better practice. My own campaign does this. We ask volunteers to bring cloth masks. We ask everybody to double masks. We ask them to bring 2 masks instead of using disposable. Now we have disposable here in case somebody shows up without a mask. We ask them if it's raining today. We ask them to bring parkas. And so we have some disposable ones here in case you forgot, but it's important that we're deliberate about this. Ask people to bring a water bottle and then keep a Brita filter at the office. But this starts from the top down. It's important that the candidate themselves stresses the need for these sustainable practices. And then, and then also this year, there's a lot of issues with COVID. As campaign professionals, we're used to doing events in a certain way, put out a box of donuts for everybody to grab from. And that becomes very difficult in the time of COVID. We don't have a lot of events, but, volunteers come in the office. I can't just put out it's not ideal to put out bottled water and, single wrap like candy. So it's coming up with creative solutions, also taking a second and being deliberate when we're very, very busy. Campaign staff and volunteers are very overworked, and they often overwork themselves. There's always something to do. Everybody here knows this. And so, and in fact, one of my first campaigns was with Erica. And one of the things we did was just looking for ways to be sustainable was we tracked where all the yard signs went. We made sure we picked them up. We said you can take them in if you want to keep it as a souvenir as we distributed them, and let people know that we were picking them up the Wednesday and Thursday after the election. We split it up, grabbed them all, grabbed the stakes, grabbed the yard signs, and now Erica is reusing those yard signs in her election now 3 years later. I'm very proud of that. I think they had to put a sticker over the one thing that she had a special election, so it was a certain day. There it is. This is fantastic. I'm sure Erica's going to address this. I was really proud of this. But with Mayor Peduto, we're using his same signs from 2013 and 2017 that we have left over. And then we're going to be picking them up afterwards. We can reuse the stakes. This will be his last campaign, so we won't be reusing these signs, but we'll recycle them at the end.
Great. Thank you all. One thing which is really striking is how in each of your comments, you can see that having campaigns run that have a really short time horizon is part of what leads to waste systematically, right? If you're trying to, and that I think goes to the point about thinking systemically about sustainability, not just in terms of physical waste, but also thinking, what are the advantages of having a political infrastructure that is ongoing, that ties people in an ongoing and continuous way into networks and relationships, so that the campaign isn't just any given campaign isn't just forced to sort of come in and overinvest in a sort of frantic effort to build relationships or to make it themselves visible, right? And I think of this, the sort of metaphor or a symbol of this, which always sticks in my mind, is that as I think perhaps many people here did, I volunteered in 2016 on the presidential campaign. And in the last week before the election, I was going around knocking on doors in my neighborhood, and I had been given, lit to leave on the doors, and I was given sheets that walk lists that I needed to go to. And there were any number of doors which had layers upon layers of sticky notes on the door, because the presidential campaign was working with a, list of voters that was out of date, that included people who were renters who hadn't lived in the city for years. And there was no mechanism for local volunteers who are out there seeing, wow, there's a misfit between what this campaign thinks it needs to push out and the actual people on the ground, who's in the doors, who's in the houses behind the doors. And so I was struck by the fact that, to me, the image of the door of the house or apartment, which is where no one is living right now, which is covered with lit, is such an image of how the misallocation of resources. Like, that money should have been, the money that was going for the sticky notes with the special information to go on the door, should have been invested in that community 4, 3 to 10 years earlier, to help build up the relationships and networks that would have made it possible for local people on the ground to do a better job of targeting in the first place. So I'd love to hear thoughts from you all about what are there, not just like the sort of the short term, like given where we are, how can we decide to run the next month of the campaign in a way that is less damaging? That certainly is an important question. But I'd love for us to pull back for a second and say, let's not take as a given a world in which campaigns are sort of hustling to build something with resources that only just became available. If we take a more long-term vision or long-term approach to political building, what would you like to see people investing in that would make it possible to run campaigns in a way that was more long-term, sustainable, engaged? Anyone want to jump in?
I'll take a quick stab at it. I think one of the things that there's some things that we would like to get passed, but frankly, I don't know that we do. And then there's other things that we can do, right? So one of the things is I've gone to, in the campaigns that I've run over the past 3 years, right, almost exclusively, maybe even a little longer, but in terms of, almost a full implementation, I would say almost 90 to 95%, is tech, right? There's tech out there, and I'm not saying that the intent of the tech was to reduce waste, but if it wasn't, the unintended consequence is so, right? And so, like minivan, right? We use minivan almost exclusively now, which digitize walk lists, right? And so now we can utilize that, almost seamlessly, with calling and with knocking. There are some folks who have not made the transition in terms of being able to use tech all that well, but I think I would say 95% implementation. There's the occasional, all right, let me print this list out for someone who just is not going to get it right now, is not tech savvy, action IDs and things like that. But I think so by virtue of tech, I think we're getting better in some regards, right? We're now, they have what they call text banking, which is really interesting. There's the number of companies that are out that will allow for it have almost doubled, right? Maybe even tripled in as many years. And so, again, we know that folks aren't at home. We don't use the standard house phone, isn't used primarily anymore. And so this, I'd like to think, was an attempt to reach those who aren't sitting in front of their TV and have their standard house phone, but utilize the mechanism of their cell phone to text. But again, an unintended consequence of that is that it reduces, some waste. Now, there are other folks in the environmental community that will come and talk to you about the overuse of phones and tech and all these other things, but one step at a time, right? And so obviously we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But those are things that we can change, that the industry has changed just by virtue of elevating and innovating how we reach out to voters. There's still a certain segment of the population, and I think we may get more into this as this conversation progresses. But your idea of like a super voter, right? Super voters carry the same characteristics. They are 9 times out of 10 older, 60 plus. And we know in that demo that folks usually have a house phone. They're less likely to text. They're more likely to watch the news. They're more likely to engage in the activities that caused the responses for campaigns for a generation, right? A few generations, right? And so campaigns will always mail to them, call them and things like that, because we know that they could represent easily 40 to 45% of turnout on election day. And so it can't be a demographic that you don't reach out to, and you have to meet them where they are, right? We can't force texting upon them. We can't force digital media and ads upon them. We have to use traditional means to reach out to them. So there are things that we can do, and then there's things that we can't do. And so I think we have to, take the innovations and still, reduce, take the win that says we can reduce, this dependency, but we can't eliminate it right now.
Just picking up on your initial question, Laura, and I think that what Moses said is exactly right. And it's also incumbent upon the candidate, if they're elected, or if they're not elected, if they lose and they want to run again, to continue to build the community that they are seeking to empower to turn out again in whatever way possible. And some local and state elected officials have done this really, really well. It's like building an army of people who are there for the long haul, there for systemic change. And, oh yeah, we need you for an election too. Okay, great, but it's built in. So, I would say that Sarah's one of them. It's just, started in her campaign several years ago and was finding different types of voters who were not the likely voters and empowering them. But yeah, it is like, it's almost as in these days, it's no matter how hard you try to build up that and maintain that pool of people, there is this frantic energy around, well, just to be safe, we're going to, send all those mailers, we're going to bombard them with mail because because the assumption is that the opponent's going to do that. You have to have the yard signs, you have to have whatever the thing is because the opponent's going to do it. It's almost like the same as like a small business and a competitor, like you have to keep up. So I think that's why it's so important, Laura, the research that you put out and having the data around what works and what doesn't. I mean, it's different in a city council race as compared to a presidential election, right? Like yard signs might be more effective for a city council race, less so in presidential elections. And in those races where maybe the local candidate in a US Senate race has done the work to identify who the on the ground organizers, super connectors are, who can do the deep canvassing and have the bought in, credibility from their groups and their circles. Like that's the most important way we can change minds and affect, get turnout. But like maybe there are people from across the country who want to do something, and so they're told by someone, write postcards, and then it turns out that postcards are extremely ineffective. So I think having really good data around what's effective can really be informative too, because you can be doing all the right things and then someone just suggests something else to layer on top of it, and it could be something incredibly unsustainable and wasteful, and you just say, well, let's just do it because we have to throw spaghetti against a wall and see what sticks. So I guess my main point is the data is important to have on like what works and what doesn't, and the every person, every candidate, every team kind of continuing to build their organizational capacity on the off years in addition to during the election years. And I understand it's tough because we have elections every year here in Pittsburgh and in the region, right? It's literally every year, so people get burned out, but that kind of sustainability is really important too.
And I think to that point, to Councilwoman Strasburger's point, that there needs to be, I think, a structure that exists outside of a singular candidate, right? So you can, because when we elect people, right, do we want them to be legislators and administrators, or do we want them to be campaigning, right? Like, and that's like I think the double-edged sword that exists, right? Like I'm a full-time legislator now. I don't like campaigning. I like legislating. I like writing policy. I like doing the constituent services. I like doing everything that's entailed in my job. But then you also, like, during election year, I mean, they say always, because it's, our elections are every 2 years. It's like, you should always be campaigning. And it's like, I guess if I'm like, if you're doing your job, then you are kind of campaigning because you're continually building relationships in the communities that you represent. So I think, having these other structures that exist that are able to enter in data when it's not in crunch time, and able to keep those voter rolls fresh, who are able to continually build in the community and also source other candidates, right? Because it's not, if you elect one person that shares your values to reduce fracking and or end fracking and reduce plastics, then you're not going to see success, right? Systemic change requires electing people at all levels of government who are going to share in that vision. So, and that is always going to have to come outside of just an individual's campaign. And then I think there's also like a real difference between how you campaign, whether you're a first-time candidate or whether you're an incumbent, because if you're an incumbent, you have the benefit of being in the office and using that office in if you structure your office the right way, it can be an office that is rooted in outreach and community building and constantly fostering those relationships. I had very different campaigns. I just won re-election, during the time of COVID, but like I barely ran. I mean, I think I did one mailer and had ordered like not that many signs. Because we've done such a good job, and I have such an amazing team at our district office that we're always building relationships. We're always doing, in time of COVID, we're doing Zoom calls on trying to get people to understand policy, understand the new programs that are rolling out that can help folks, just being really responsive to the need. So it's just a very different race. And sometimes there's going to be people who we want to keep in office, and sometimes there's going to be new fresh faces that we want. And, that's also plays into what level of sustainability can be, or the amount of stuff that's needed, I would say, to help get that word out. And then I also think that just goes a little bit to like campaign reform and like, how do we campaign, and how do we change that systemically, right? So, we may not think about like, we're thinking about the reduction of like yard signs and swag and the number of mailers and making sure data is updated, but how do we make it easier for people to run? How do we lower those barriers? Do we incorporate something like public financing of campaigns? Do we finally put caps on campaign contributions at the various levels of government? I'll tell you, as a state representative, I can receive, my PAC can receive any amount of money, right? Someone can write me a $10,000 check if they want. And so that lends itself to people who are well connected and tangential to wealth, will have an easier time raising money and being able to enter into a campaign or a race. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear, there's a bunch of kids running around downstairs. I'm watching. I'm not watching my boyfriend's nieces and nephews, but he is right now. So there's a lot of kids in the background.
I was going to chime in here. I don't have many thoughts. Everybody's covered a lot of this, but I think one of the answers is to elect fantastic, environmentally friendly candidates like Sarah and Erica, who are so strong and so great they don't get challengers. And they don't have to run campaigns after that. That would be the ideal. To echo some of what Moses was saying about how technology has helped us with some of this stuff is, a lot of us use minivan now, and then we can also. So most volunteers are able to do that, but it's also taking that extra 5, 10, 20 minutes, couple days to maybe get an older, or not even necessarily older, like less tech-friendly volunteer, learn him how to teach him how to use minivan. I currently have somebody that's delivering my yard signs who's very resistant to using minivan, and I keep going over it with them. I'm like, okay, we're gonna get in, we're gonna get your login and get your rolling. So we don't have to print out paper lists the entire campaign, because you do a little bit of work at the beginning and it pays off, later on. And finally, also during, once COVID hit last year, I was in a primary, and we, it kind of probably reduced waste a bit. Probably a similar amount of mail went out. All of a sudden we weren't dropping lit at mailboxes for a couple months. Nobody was knocking. And we got really creative with a lot of phone calls, with relational organizing, which is a concept where you have volunteers reach out to everybody they know. We have all these volunteers bouncing around these neighborhoods that they don't live in. And it's really, there's ways to connect, and we're still figuring this out, how to, connect with this person in this neighborhood, get them a list of everybody in their neighborhood, and have them reach out to them personally, which is also one of the most effective ways to swing a voter, is to get somebody they know, their neighbor, their friend, their brother, to talk to them about your candidate. Well, yeah, I think that's all I really have for now.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Skylar's last point, and several people had asked and asked in the chat about, well, what does the research say about how effective different techniques of contacting are? And what's most striking is that actually for almost any given technique that you go to the to research studies of, whether that's phone banking, door knocking, campaign flyers and so on, the range of findings of about how impactful any given technique is larger than the difference between techniques. So one way of thinking about that is to say, oh, I guess we don't know anything. I would say that differently. I would say there's it's not the impact of the technique doesn't sort of automatically inhere in the technique itself. So how it's implemented actually has a big difference. And there actually was a super interesting study done in a Los Angeles down ballot race where they found that even having people canvass in their own zip code made a measurable difference in how effective turnout was. And that wasn't even, so that wasn't going down to the level of relational contacting of saying, I'm going to talk to only people who I actually know. It's just that if you have people canvassing, if you have volunteers knocking doors in their own zip code, that they're more effective in mobilizing that community, because part of the impact of those door knocks is not just about the conversation between the canvasser and the person who answers the door or the person who they were looking for. It's the ancillary conversations. It's the conversation they have with the husband or the wife. It's the conversation that the person you talk to has the next day. When it's a candidate who themselves knocks on a door, it's the way that, you know, someone tells someone down the street about the conversation they had with you. So all of the evidence that we have suggests that how any given technique is implemented is extremely important. And yet and that sort of goes to, I guess, you know, Skylar was making this point that, you know, training people and should not be, I think, thought of as somehow separate from this. Investing time in your volunteers and investing time in hearing from people who are volunteering on the campaign about what outreach mechanism works well in their community is probably underutilized. Like if we think that the goal is to find like the one size fits all knowledge, we're actually missing the most meaningful knowledge, which is that campaigning isn't one size fits all. So that in a given, there are communities where if you're not sending those mailers, you are not going to reach the full breadth of voters, right? Their community, and this was the, you know, Moses, I think, was making really important points that there are communities, there are demographics where that you're going to meet that voter where they are, and that's going to involve, you know, sending a respectful letter. That has to happen, and without that, you're not going to reach that voter. Well, then you work with that. Similarly, you know, with yard signs, you know, there are campaigns where people, and there are communities where people feel really strongly that they have to have yard signs out as part of their, you know, showing their neighbors who they're voting for. Well, that's really not just about the plastic sign. That's about the relationship and how people communicate their political loyalties and their, you know, how do I put as a volunteer or as a supporter, how do I put my reputation behind you as a candidate in my community? And if the answer is yard signs, then go for it. Then for sure that's meaningful. If it's meaningful to the volunteers, it's going to be meaningful to the campaign. But it's not just about the physical stuff, right? It's about the conversations, the relational conversations that surround it. I know we want to have time for questions. So, and we've had some great ones in the chat and people can put more questions there. Sarah, Erica, Moses, Skylar, do you have any, you know, points you want to jump in with before we move to take some questions from the folks who are here, or something that's come up that you want to add to before we throw the floor open?
I would say let's open. I would, you know, I don't have anything. I'd rather open the floor so we can have more time for folks to get their questions answered.
All right, super. So let's go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think everyone else feels the same way.
We're going to take that as a yes. So let's throw the floor open. Does anyone, and people can either, you can raise your hand using the raise hand reaction, or people can put a question in. If you already asked a question in chat, probably I did not see it. So you have to throw, and it's lost in the really exciting conversations folks are having back and forth in the chat. So if you have a question you want to throw into chat, or raise your hand to ask a question. We'd love to hear from people who are here.
Nick, have you gotten anything from the chat you'd like to start with? There's not a lot of questions, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I've been trying to monitor the chat, but there's so much good stuff in there. Yeah, there's questions about you know, how to shut off the stream of direct mail when, you know, and then also how to what happens to the yard signs after the election and all the other stuff that's out there. I mean, I suppose if they're in your own yard, it's your responsibility, but so much of it is by the roadside and so on and so forth. There's some questions that are about the sort of nitty gritty of the waste and the plastics that's generated during the campaign. And then there are some big questions about how great it would be to have campaign financing and also shorter election periods and blah, blah, blah. So there's micro and macro, and I don't know what people might want to jump in on, but I'm trying to keep I'm trying to keep track, Lara, of what's cropping up here. Maybe because people could speak their questions as well.
So how to shut off the stream, I think was one of the questions I wanted to address. That's really tough. But I think the best way to do it, I mean, you got to realize campaigns are dealing with thousands of data points, and it's hard to integrate certain specific data points into that. So how to shut off the stream? I think the best way is to send an email to a campaign, say, if you send me another piece of mail, I'm not voting for your candidate. I'm supporting you, but if I get another piece of mail, I'm not. That usually raises a flag and might get them to remove you from the database. Or say, I'm not supporting your candidate no matter what you do. But often, and to clarify for everybody, what campaigns are often doing is they want to put you in one of two camps. Are you supporting or you're not? And they generally don't talk to you as much after you put yourself in one of those two camps. But if you're in the middle and a campaign talks to you, they come to your door, I don't know, I'll think about it. They're going to talk to you again. So the best way to get them to stop talking to you generally is to put yourself in one of the camps if you can. So that's my one piece of advice, but it's very hard to shut off the spigot with all the things because campaigns they're busy. They'll get this email and somebody who's overworked, who's worked 14 hours that day won't, code that data point. But, what I often have voters do is they'll say, I'm supporting you, don't talk to me again. So we mark them as like supporting, refused. And that ensures that we pretty much never talk to them again.
Yeah, and another comment in chat and about this is about contacting, but not about mailers, was suggested that if you vote early and then you can tell if you want to get yourself off the contact list, vote early by mail or on if there's an early in-person voting, and then let the campaign know the next time you're contacted, you will be taken off that list and they will remove you from the universe of people they're recontacting. There was a question from Dylan Shapiro in the chat about how sustainability efforts are different in running citywide races or smaller races, or I would ask larger races. Have any of you seen, ways in which there are techniques that you could be using in a smaller race, but that don't work on a larger scale, or vice versa?
It comes down to not having as much money, right? Smaller races don't have as much money to do it, so there's probably less waste. To piggyback on the other thing, it is a very difficult the calculus to send out that extra mailer or not to is a difficult one, right? I mean, these are individuals largely concerned with either winning or not winning, right? And if the decision is to do this mailer and potentially win or not do it and lose, that is a big decision to make, right? And so if it comes down that, hey, we may have a little bit more waste in the environment, but I win, that's going to win out every single time, right? I think what we have to do somewhat collectively, right, is try to figure out and decide how can we best reach people with the least impact, right? We in the political world use data, right? We use it now almost to a fault, right? It's almost like a money ball, right? Where we calculate the effectiveness of almost everything, right? And we have literally in my inbox, I have pollsters and media people, and they're talking about what it would cost to have an impact, right? How much does it cost to have an impact? And we calculate these things and try to figure them out so that we can maximize, how much exposure our candidates have versus being able to actually win, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't start a campaign to be environmentally friendly. We start a campaign to win. Those two things does not have to be mutually exclusive, right? But what they do have to do, we do have to come up with something that's comparable and competitive that increases the numbers while decreasing our footprint. And until we're able to do that, we're going to end up at that crossroad. And when we get to that crossroad, I can promise you every single time that the environment and our footprint is going to take a backseat to winning. And so it's incumbent upon us to figure out what that measure is, what that calculus is, and make it be more effective than the latter. And once we're able to do that, it means that we're more effective in terms of exposure. And the unintended consequence is that we reduce our footprint on the environment by doing it. But it's going to come as an unintended consequence and not as a priority. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's where we are.
There was a hand up from Brian. I think there we go. Your hand is down, but Brian, do you want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, I was, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I had supported a candidate and was holding a rally this summer. And one of the things about paying for this was we're going to need treats and food. And of course, in the age of COVID, individually wrapped food and plastic water bottles. I said, you're killing me. and of course, with the age of COVID, people didn't want to come out to these things at all. I'm just wondering if we couldn't use as a campaign notice, just gathering your thoughts on this here, we putting it out there initially, we are intentionally not providing water or food in plastic bags because it's a green issue, and making that a campaign strength. And I'm just curious if that is something that sounds reasonable to do, and that maybe we could even get back to like a tray of cookies where one person would hand you one cookie with a gloved hand, if those things sound good. And then also I saw Nick had a question about our mayoral candidates' stance on these things. I'd love to hear from that too. What are your thoughts? And thank you.
Well, Brian, this is, I think, a perfect time to be trying this out, because as Skylar mentioned earlier, COVID makes this attempt easier in some regards because there are fewer in-person events. It's not like we're going to house parties with finger food every single night. Most of the house parties are Zoom parties. And so bring your own, beverage and your own container built in. But you're right, when you do then host events, like it becomes a little bit more challenging. But it already, just the suggestion of sustainable campaigns, as someone who's run, now this is the second time running on my track record of environmental advocacy, I was like, yes, this is going to be a hallmark of my campaign, and hopefully it can grow in the future. And then you just start thinking about it, and I'm in a very privileged space to be able to continue to fundraise, and from a population that has money to give to an unchallenged candidate so far. So far I don't have an opponent, but also to not have an opponent and to be able to have that space and that time to think about it, and to do it during a time of COVID when it's a little bit less fast paced and a little bit easier to, to try this. But even so, I'm asking these questions. What does this mean? What is the standard of sustainable campaign? So this little sticker I held up was to cover over the Vote March 6th special election part of the old yard signs. So we ordered a number of these as opposed to ordering so many new yard signs. We have more than 100 old ones that Skylar and his team collected from last time, but we did have to order a few new ones to, to distribute to people who didn't have them from last time. But so that's a start. But even this, not fully sustainable. We're holding an event outside in a couple next weekend, and it's going to involve running. It's going to involve people running to collect petition signatures for me. And we want to have water for the runners afterward. We want to have some snacks or food afterwards. And the question is, yeah, how do you do that? So having some sort of a guide to candidates and their team would be really, really helpful. And I know this is the beginning of the brainstorming session, but I just think that having a guide, or like, even if it was like a LEED certified type of, if you want to have like the platinum version of the sustainable campaign, this is what you follow, but this is the next step below that if you can't quite do that. And it would just be nice to have that kind of information and someone thinking through that.
Well, you certainly have been the green council member in Pittsburgh City Council, and I can tell you from all of us on our group, we deeply appreciate your commitment to that. So thank you. I hope your example spreads like wildfire.
I just want to add to that too. I think, Councilperson Strasburger made a lot of really great points. And I also want to stress that like individual actions on sustainability can't supersede inclusivity in campaigns. Whenever we're trying to build a campaign, sometimes it's not about targeting the super voters, but it's asking the question of who isn't voting. And the same goes for who's participating in campaigns, right? And so everything that we do, I know with the way that we campaign, and I'm sure the folks who are on here, was how do we get as many people, how do we remove as many barriers as possible so that they can participate? And the reality is that sometimes when you are inspiring to people who are lower income, you want to be able to feed them and respect that, like, here's water, here's a snack, like I value your time that you're here. You want to provide childcare so that their families can participate, and you need activities, so there's paper and crayons and we try to get that stuff from Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse, but there's this acknowledgement of like I respect that you are giving me some of your time and energy, and I'd rather if someone is going out on a really hot day knocking doors, like we're going to encourage people to bring water bottles and their own snacks and everything, and also we're going to have those things too, because it's very important that people stay safe, healthy, and hydrated.
Let me butt in for a second. I would love to have Leandra Mira and Margaret Fried ask their questions, or else Nick, could read them. Can you all ask your questions?
And Diane has her hand up too.
Sorry.
I can unmute. This is Peggy Fried, Margaret Fried, and I am. I was very much taken with Lara's point earlier that if somehow we had structures in place, rather than having to start from scratch every time with a whole group of people, we might be able to be more sustainable. And I wondered, I've been reading a lot about how the long-term organizing in Georgia, that Stacey Abrams and her group were part of, how successful they were. And I wonder, I haven't read, extensively on it, but I wonder if we might be able to learn something, from that. And they were so successful, and maybe that would we could learn. I wonder how much of that required, it seems to me that putting up yard signs was not what they were doing. They were not sending out thousands of leaflets, they were doing other things. And I'm wondering if people who have studied that, maybe you could tell me more about it. And I'd be interested to know if it led to a less use of unsustainable, things. And I don't know who to ask of that, but if anybody wants to answer that, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say several people have put links in the chat to recent writings about the long-term development, the multi-year campaigns in Georgia, in Arizona, and that's, I think, a really crucial point. And it would be great if that among the resources that I know Ed is planning to circulate later, we could include some of those resources that are not narrowly focused on the issue of environmental sustainability, but about the broader, broader political ecosystem that could have these kind of effects. I also want to make sure that we get, as we're getting close to the 6 o'clock hour here, I want to make sure that we get some folks who've had their hands up for a while. So Diane and I think Lee also, and maybe we can get 2 or 3 questions on the table, and then go around to make sure that all of our panelists get a chance to respond to whichever of the questions is most compelling to them, or where they have something to jump in with. Diane, do you want to jump in?
Sure, thank you. So first, I just really want to thank everyone for being here. As a member of the PASUP Steering Committee, all these events, as you know, take a little bit of work, and we are just thrilled to have you and such an excellent panel and moderator. One of the things that we talked about a lot with our PASUP committee was the simple step as, I love what you said about reusing your plastic signs, but could we not have them in the first place? Have you thought about paper signs? I know one of the candidates we talked to actually did switch over, and some of our members of our steering committee have had experience with having paper signs and found them to last quite well for 6 months. And obviously you don't need your signs for 6 months. So I think that would really make an impact on us. So would anyone like to address that? Thank you.
So I used paper signs the first time around, and we printed the date, and we ended up using, like Councilperson Strasburger showed, we had a vote sticker that we ended up putting on over the date to reuse them during the general. And by the general, they were done. They were like, they didn't withstand the rain, all of the other stuff, right? Because you have to think, like, we had signs out probably from March to November. And so when we did them this next go around, we did plastic, we ordered fewer, and we said we're not going to put them out and like on Sign Island somewhere along 28. They're only going to go to individuals' homes, right? If they're interested in saying that I support Sarah, I'm gonna do that, and we ask them to keep it, or we pick it back up, right? And so now I have 100 signs in my basement that I will reuse again. And so it's about using them multiple years, and we just found that the quality was outside of was able to do that. But I would say maybe first time candidates using paper, because maybe you won't have to use them again, or if you're just gonna run once, I don't know. That's kind of like, that's a little abysmal. That's not optimistic, but
no, I appreciate that, Sarah, but I guess I also want to say that, I understand if this is something you're going to do and you want to use them again, I think that's fantastic. And I have certainly had political signs that are plastic, and I have myself just kept them because I know I'm going to support that candidate again. Yeah. But the other thing is, I think the last step whenever we look at the R's is always recycle. That's the last thing we want to do, right? And I think if we are going to give out signs and ask the people recycle them, which is great, that we then actually tell them how to do that. Because I think what happens so many times is we put them on curbside and they are not curbside recyclable as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know. I'm sure Sabrina could speak to that, but if we're going to give them a sign, can we at the same time give them the information? Please bring this sign back, or please recycle it, and here's how.
I mean, I think that's a really great suggestion, in making sure that people really understand that, and where to go, in the county or in the city to be able to properly recycle, both campaign literature as well as signage.
I think I've seen the hands up from Bethany and also from Lee. So I want to make sure that we get both of them to have a chance to raise questions, and then we'll make sure we have a last go around from folks on our
panel. I was just going to say that I really like what Ed said about the green candidate being so sustainable. I don't know if you guys can see in the chat, but I really like that perspective, because I think, I'm sorry, I'm trying to put my words together. I think that a green candidate actually has an advantage if he publicly set boundaries against plastic. I think that would give him more votes. And I definitely think that there is plenty of networking in environmental groups and, you know, online, where people would be talking like, oh, this candidate, isn't going to have plastic signs or isn't going to give out plastic bottles or whatever. I think it would actually be a great advantage to the candidate, because he would set an example in action, instead of just by words. So that's all.
Just say one really easy way to start that path, down that path, is for all of the groups that are, the environmental groups that endorse, to start including those questions in their candidate questionnaires. So that would do two things. It would get candidates starting to think about this and knowing, and their whole teams knowing, oh, if I want to get endorsed by this environmental group that endorses candidates, I need to incorporate this into my campaign and change behavior. And second, it would incorporate that consideration into their endorsement. So I think that would be a great thing for, the groups that are doing that to start incorporating.
Okay, so my question, Sarah scooped me. I'm hoping to reuse my signs, Sarah, but I literally was going to say, like, for a first-time candidate, what do you guys recommend that I do, aside from, I already ordered some, which are plastic, terrible, but again, hoping to reuse them. I hadn't thought about the shorter term proposition of the paper, but I would happy to accept any tips. And again, it's a city council campaign. I'm a single mom, so we're on a lot lower level than some folks on here, but I would just appreciate the help.
Any thoughts or reactions or responses to any of these last round of questions that we've heard?
So I'll take a stab at a few, especially the ones that I can remember for sure. I think there was one about like snacks and water. Hopefully there ends up being a way to provide reusable containers that we can have water in. I know that there's several fountains and things like that you can reuse water bottles. Something that's a little bit more durable than what you can buy at the store now. But the difficult part is that we can't always, if volunteers or supporters show up to an event and there's no food and no water, right? We'll take a huge hit, publicly about, not providing these things for voters and volunteers. Then we will if we provided them and made sure that the food was in wasn't in plastic containers, but something that was reusable. If the water bottles that we had to do that we're recycling them, that there's things that there's recycling facilities that are clearly marked. I think we got to find a balance between being able to run an effective campaign and being environmentally friendly. It cannot be a zero-sum game unless we have the mechanisms in place to do that. The signs, there's corrugated plastic, there's paper, there's poly bags. They all have different price points. They all have different providers. I think that usually now the number one consideration is cost. Then if we're going through someone, is it a union printer, depending on where in the country you are? So almost, unanimously here, where things have to be union made. So there are a lot of considerations when ordering things, and campaigns have to be able to find a way to justify making it an environmentally friendly step. Not that they don't want to, it's because that's another piece in the calculus that says that we have to do it because of X or Y factor. And those things have to exist. And I don't think that there's enough noise about it, right? Like, so groups like PASUP and other groups that are out there that care about the environment have to become more of a force in electing candidates for them to put that on their radar as a must do. Now, I would venture to guess, I don't know for sure, that there was a time in history where having a union bug on your literature or on your materials was not a big thing. But at a certain point in time, unions became more influential that it was a have to have, right? There was a maturation process with that. And as that, went from not having it to it now being a staple, that same maturation process have to happen in the environmental community.
I was going to have a quick thought. This is a great question, Bethany. I appreciate it. And I think we covered a lot of this stuff and answered probably a lot of questions that you might have, and thank you for running. The best advice I can give you right now is, I know you have a campaign staff, and is to give them the latitude to they're overworked, they're tired, but tell them to take a beat, ask them to take a beat. The leadership comes from you to say, hey. And the one thing I would tell you to do is, in your volunteer script, when you're asking volunteers to come out and do something, make sure that your field director, your campaign manager, when they're making that call, that in that script is, hey, bring a water bottle. We won't have bottles of water. Bring double mask, so we don't have to use our reusable, like our surgical masks, like 4 year, these like single-use ones, and bring a parka, bring an umbrella. Have people come bring these by the office, so you're not doing these kinds of things. But it's important that leadership comes from you, and that they're given kind of the latitude to understand that, like, hey, I'm really busy. I have 1,000 things to do, but Bethany is okay with me taking a beat to do this. And I think that's important. That's the only really important here.
That's from the reuse side. From the reuse side too, like, there's a lot of people running campaigns, right? And so I know my clipboards grew legs and went somewhere else for my first campaign, and I'm sure they're being used and it's wonderful. And there's walk lists attached to them, and I've collected many petition signatures. But I needed them, and I was like, instead of going out and buying all new ones, I'm just going to put a call on the internet. I'm going to make some phone calls. I'm like, who's got some clipboards that they now want to give back to the campaign? And ended up getting all the clipboards that we needed. So, I would just say, put calls out into the universe. People are very willing to want to share the different pieces of mobile infrastructure that exists that can help with campaigns. So.
That's a great point, Sarah. Real quick about yard sign stakes. Somebody mentioned this in the chat earlier. If you order 1,000 yard signs, you'll get 1,000 yard sign stakes. But we know a lot of those go in windows, they go on the walls. So campaigns are always left with a number of stakes, and these are very expensive. They're very expensive to ship. So if you reach out to prior campaigns, they often have make sure you have the same size. But I personally reuse, when I was with Emily Kincaid, we didn't have the money to pay for all these stakes. So we asked around, and we found about 500 stakes and saved us probably about $1,000. We made a minor donation to those campaigns that donate them to us. But that's one thing you can do. You may have already ordered your signs, maybe too late.
I'm going to butt in now because it's almost 6 o'clock. I'm going to give a brief closing statement, and then I'm happy to, hang around on this if Marin's happy to keep the chat, the meeting open. So I appreciate so much everyone here, and I hope that this will just be the beginning of a much wider discussion. And I want to encourage everyone, please, to get involved in PASUP and similar organizations. I'm going to tell my story, which may turn you away because I'm not making any money right now, but I've been so inspired by this that I just resigned from being a clinical physician because I want to focus on opportunities for entrepreneurship, which are going to help the environment. So please help me out by giving me, you know, ideas. But we have so much opportunity for people to lead and to follow in PASUP. So please join us. And Diane just asked that if anyone is interested in helping us to put together a sustainable campaign sort of toolkit, that is one opportunity for involvement, and we can really make a difference here. So I'll close with that. And if anyone else, and Laura, anybody, other panelists have any closing words, then everybody feel free to leave. We're not going to try to make you hostages all night.
And can I chip in with something about the chat?
Sure. Of course.
There's so much good information and good links and resources and ideas in the chat. If folks want to just grab it, I mean, probably there's a more technical way to do this. I just sort of click on it, select all, and copy it over into another file. But that'll disappear once we leave the meeting. That chat will disappear. So if you want to grab things there, please do.
That's a good idea.
And I'd just like to ask whether we can all give a round of applause to our fabulous panelists who were all so generous in making time for this.
I'm copying.
Yes, and the chat certainly will be preserved.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks to all the young people, because so often it's difficult for volunteer organizations to get young people involved. And obviously you guys are the future. So thanks so much.
And please, if you're a steering committee member, stay with us for a few minutes.
Oh, there's so many chats. It's going to take all day to highlight them.
Everybody.
Great. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. Good to see you folks.
Just a wonderful blessing to us, Sarah. Really. I mean, you're fantastic.
And thank you to all the other candidates and policy makers who also were with us today.
Yes, we didn't call you
Some
out.
of whom chimed in.
Bethany, yeah. I want to
Bethany,
find
Lisa Middleman was with us for a bit.
If you guys have candidates and campaign managers, if you have ideas of what you think you need on such a document, you've asked us to work on a toolkit. What do you need? What would you like? So, you know, help us help you. And hopefully we'll get some people that actually want to work on that. We can give something back useful.
Great to see you all. It was such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to PASUP for organizing as well. I'm going to duck out.
Y'all search.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. I'm telling you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, you were great. All of you were great. Thanks so much, Moses.
For having us. Appreciate you guys. If you need anything, definitely by all means reach out to myself, the campaign. You know, I think it's important that we have folks that are on the campaign that are mindful of these things. And so as long as we're mindful, we're going to always think about ways to do it. I know in the city, I've tried to find places to bring literature afterwards, and there are not many places. So if you guys can send out resource guides to campaigns of where they can recycle these things. I went to Construction Junction. I've gone to other places. It's tough to leave these things outside in front of your house on recycling day. But so we had bigger facilities that campaigns can use to drop excess lit and things like that off. I mean, I think that's a great resource to campaigns going forward. And then if campaigns aren't doing it, collect the wires, right? Like go around and collect the wires after election day, and then offer to sell it back to them, right? Campaigns, we spent $50 per wire sign, right? So if you guys go out and you guys collect 500 signs, you know, sell them back to campaigns for right? I mean, I think that if campaigns are reluctant to recycle their own size, find groups and people and individuals that are willing to do it, and reach out to campaigns in the very beginning of elections. And hey, we have wires for dimensions, and you know, we'll sell them to you at a quarter each or 50 cents each or so, and continue to help the things that you guys want to do.
Would be amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, can we just have a thrift store? I just realized I was unmuted, sorry. Can we just have a thrift store of like, you know, slightly used needs a good, loving new home, campaign stuff, like those stakes.
Wow, great idea.
Hey, Simone, can we put that as part of the, part of your store, your thrift store?
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Thomas Letters, not yours personally, Simone, sorry.
Yeah, if only it
signage
wasn't like
depot.
completely over capacity, but I think, yeah, we do. I mean, there are so many vacant places right now. There's like just so many warehouses waiting to be filled with reusable.
Maybe Reimagine Recycling can take
Yeah,
this.
how many, well, Reimagine Recycling is working with a plastic shredder. So the wires really can be reused. I mean, I go to our polling place, which is Colfax School, and I pull signs out of the dumpsters to use for garden stuff. But that's one of so many polling places. And somebody early on was talking about going around, telling people we'll pick them up Wednesday or Thursday, but that's not soon enough because the polling places are at public facilities like schools and community centers that clean up, and those things are gone by morning.
yeah, sometimes that
You're muted, Moses.
Yeah, so I mean, if there was a concerted effort to do it, I think that there's in any given election cycle, thousands of signs, right? That are like just signs and
Probably tens of thousands.
that are all over the place. And so even reaching out to campaigns to make sure that if they're doing it, but didn't have a place to store them. But I think that there's an intentional effort to do it. I think that there is some stock in being able to pick up the, and then also the U-shaped stakes as well. I'll jump off. I have a few campaign things to get to, but I do appreciate the invitation and the time. And you guys have a friend in me and in our campaign. So please reach out to us if we can be of assistance in any kind of way. But I am gonna jump off.
You were fantastic.
Okay, thanks so much.
By the way,
was
update,
that?
Lucas Becerra is fine and nobody else was hurt, apparently.
Good.
You missed-
Something about the sign pickup idea is I think it does make much more sense for a centralized, unified effort to do the pickup because it has to happen that night. And it just isn't efficient for every campaign to go around to every polling place. There should be a list of polling place, and the sign retrieval people should go around to every polling place. And then if they lose, then they get recycled properly because they're in a centralized place and they figure out how to do that. And if they win, they can be given back, they'd be sorted.
That's a brilliant idea.
And yeah, so it could be run by volunteers. It could be a small business that would basically be in competition with the big sign companies. And this is the kind of sign that I know that when I got it, and it's in perfect condition. And it's a better grade of paper sign. It may be plastic coated, but even so, the amount of plastic that's on it, I think if it were in a landfill, it would decompose and not be here for a zillion years. If it were blown away, it would probably decompose and not be here for a million years. I don't know if it can be recycled. I did tell Darwin Luba, who is Lisa Middleman's campaign manager, about it, and I believe they ordered them instead of the plastic sleeves they were planning to order. Because it lasted through the winter from when I went to early vote till past the inauguration. And that was through a pretty snowy winter.
So Maren, if you can get that resource of where you ordered, because it sounded like Sarah.
Well, the name is on it. It's
okay. Well,
and,
share
and
that.
there, yeah, it's
I think it's Gill Line.
Gill Line, GILL-line.
The ones we did for Erica 4 years ago, sat in people's yards. Now hers was a special election, so it was like 8 weeks, 10 weeks that they were in the yards. Picked back up, and she, I've seen them. They're in really good shape.
Yeah, I have seen some paper signs degrade.
Yeah, I think if they sit out, and it probably depends on which kind it is, but if they sit out for 8-9 months from a primary into a general, you get a different.
And at that point, your neighbors are going to kill you anyway, so not a good idea. I speak from experience.
Well, I kept mine
Well,
up past the inauguration just because I didn't trust them.
communication from a campaign that says, bring in your sign, bring them back out in the general, just to like and with the explanation that we're being, we're
Responsible.
trying to protect the environment by not having these signs out when we're not actively campaigning. I think I would respond and be impressed by that communication from a campaign.
Yeah.
So is that something Peduto's campaign would be willing to do? Add that to their literature that, you know, please take the sign and please then put it away after primary and take it out again and then bring it
So,
back?
Actually, what we've already done is, and the same thing we do with Erica, and that's what I do with every campaign, is say that, you know, tell them, you know, hey, here's a sign. We're going to be picking these up after the election. So, you know, with Erica, they actually paid us 3 days after the election, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the campaign staff divvied up the City Council District 8. And I did this with Emily Kincaid, did it with Frank Dermody, did with Bobby Wilson. It's not the funnest thing. It's better if you win to like go out and do this. It's you're tired, you get up, and you drive around. But yeah, we're letting everybody know that's taking a sign like, hey, we'll be picking these back up after the election. If you want to keep it, bring it inside by Thursday morning, and we'll be by. So, you know, every once in a while there's somebody that doesn't bring it in, contacts us and wants their sign back. And then in the general election, I did this with Bobby Wilson when I ran a primary into a general where everybody brought their signs back and we picked them all up. And then we circled back in September. And we put all the signs up at once, which was a nice like kind of show of force in a general election where we had an opponent. So, and that also like saved the signs a little bit. And so Bobby Wilson took all those signs and they're sitting in his basement. Oftentimes it's like candidate storage. Like Emily Kincaid has, you know, a couple hundred signs sitting in her basement now. We have, you know, we pulled out signs from a storage unit for Peduto. And yeah, so that's, yeah, we absolutely have a commitment to doing that.
Yeah, the polling places just need to be addressed separately because each polling place could have 30 signs. And it's just more efficient than expecting. I mean, the campaign the night of the election is doing other things, almost certainly.
Simone in the chat actually brought this up, that usually we ask campaign poll workers to bring the signs with them, drop them off the campaign office with materials. So that's a nice like kind of distribution way. That's a great point, Maren.
Yeah,
but
so
if you have a good poll
that.
operation, you can get people to do that. But once again, it requires training. It requires, you know, telling volunteers exactly what they're going to have to do and making that ask.
And I don't have the impression that every poll is well populated with campaign workers from every campaign. So
No,
there's
they're not.
just going to be a lot that are missed. So if the campaign workers take them, fine, they're pre-sorted.
Yeah.
They've gotten to their particular candidate. But the vast bulk, and this comes from year after year of harvesting from one polling place out of how many dozens are in the city? 100? I don't know.
You're absolutely correct. I am in picking up signs myself with poll workers. I grab signs for other campaigns if I know them. Like I'll have a stack of 20 from, you know, Lisa Middleman or Bethany Holland in our election. Yeah, it's challenging. A central repository would probably would be great.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there that like also if that was like a sort of community driven effort with you know, volunteers that are, I don't know, I feel like it could just be sort of a community building thing and also make sure that it actually gets done, because that's the other thing is that, you know, if they're not there, then somebody at that school is going to be responsible for, you know, taking them down, and you know, that sucks.
Well, that's the status quo. That's the status quo. The custodians clean them up when they get there first thing in the morning and throw them in their dumpsters, and saying they should set them aside for later pickup is, I think, not going to be effective.
Yeah,
it's an ask for them to find a place for them, and it's, you know, you're going to have to be communicating with whoever knows at 100 different locations. So
right, if that could be coordinated, just all the polls, all the polling places, that would be, I just feel like that would make such a huge difference. So we could have extra teams for those little sign islands, right?
Any thoughts about what any of y'all want to do with PASUP, or, you know, what we should do?
I'm going to head out. We stuck around a little bit for a chat here, but I appreciate the time, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. You're great.
I would just, I mean, I wrote this in the chat a little bit ago, but I just like really think that as being like my experience on campaigns, and those of you who know me, like, know how much it breaks my heart every time, like, I can't prioritize sustainability in every little detail of my life. Working on campaigns is like so difficult to prioritize. Like, you just have all these people with different priorities on you. And for me, it's always sustainability and equity. And those don't have to like those can overlap, right? Because, you know, environmental racism is a real thing. And equity can usually be solved like in the same way, you know, of like sharing resources and stuff. That is also sustainable. And so you know, but I really, really think that like groups like PASUP and just anyone who's passionate about this should take the lead on creating more sustainable campaigns, because when you're in a campaign, it is impossible to like devote extra time and energy, and you get so much pushback, because you heard a lot of, you know, you heard these people, you know, like all the panelists today talk about these challenges that they have in doing this. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I've, you know, come up with millions of strategies around the way that we've done things, but to implement those strategies really takes, you know, not just pressure, but like actual, like going in saying, you know, like, I am part of this campaign as a volunteer. I care about it. And I care about sustainability. And so my contribution to this campaign is going to be helping you like find these tools and bringing in the, you know, resources that create sustainability, and not just putting that burden on the candidates, because it is just so incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's all a matter of priorities. I certainly get that, Simone. And if you would, you know, want to mail us some suggestions or be part of a group to put together this toolkit, that would be wonderful. I know your plate is really full, but you know, if you would shoot us, you know, even some quick ideas, maybe there'd be a group of people that want to work on that. Because I, you know, it was really exciting for me to hear the candidates say that they would like that. It was also really embarrassing and funny to hear Erica give that story, since I know I was that person.
I'm not surprised at all. I love it.
But it was kind of funny to hear that in retrospect, because I had just moved here, so I did not know the members of the community. Now I'm sure I would approach that differently for a couple of reasons. You know, first of all, I'm in the community, and second of all, because I you know, I've grown and say things differently. But I do still, when there was and when there will be again a chance to be in community with people and hear people lecturing or on panels and whatnot, if I do see people doing something unsustainable up on the stage, I always call them out. And I have held people in a, you know, eye-to-eye gaze saying, you're in control of these events. You're the one that signed this contract to be here. Can you make me a promise here and now that you will never do an event again with a water bottle on the stage? And I stand there until they promise. So I've calmed down a little bit, but not too much. But I mean, you know, they're the leaders and they're standing there. And I understand how, you know, that doesn't always translate into campaigns, but, you know, like, you know, people do pay attention to what are they doing when they're on stage. So, you know, what do you serve people, you know, at this running event that Erica's going to have, you know, that's a little bit different, perhaps. I understand, but there's still solutions. But, you know, when you're going to be the only one on camera, you know, you're Barack Obama and you are giving a speech and you've got a, you know, disposable water bottle. Oh, come on, you don't need to do that. So anyway.
Well, I want to express frustration, knowing that frustration is often required for creativity, but where are the people like LCV that Diane tried to contact, you know, the Sierra Club chapter, all these people, like these huge organizations with tons of money and staff? Why didn't they think of this? And like, how do we get them engaged?
Well, can I just say, like, thank you for saying that, because, you know, like a few years ago, I met with Next Gen Climate when I was organizing for another group. And this is supposedly a climate organization, and they're handing me like little plastic frisbees, plastic baseball caps, this like full page literature on cardstock, because they had, you know, millions of dollars that they were spending so wastefully. And this is this huge organization. Same with, I worked for Sierra Club in 2004, and there was nothing sustainable about the way that we ran that campaign. We were talking about environmental issues, but there was nothing sustainable what we were actually doing. And that is always this huge gap. And it really falls on, like, you know, the people that they're hiring either don't have like a lot of power over that because you're doing this national sort of thing and it's all just like coming to you, or it's like, or those people, you know, just don't know, like they're just being hired to do a job, right? And they don't actually like have that same dedication. So it's absolutely, yeah, there's always this like conflict where like they're trying to push values, but they're not living them.
Thank you.
I see that and feel that all the time. And I think it's just, like I said, you know, sometimes, I mean, we just have to feel these things out. Sometimes it's, you know, we have to do this graciously, like when we're, and sometimes we just have to say, what the hell are you doing? And call them out publicly.
God, I admire Al Gore, but I've been told that he has like a huge environmental footprint. And some Republican says to me, oh yeah, Al Gore, look at his, you know, 5 mansions or whatever the hell. So
watching An Inconvenient Truth, I was struck by how often they showed him on airplanes.
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
I have a question. I've just about given up, especially, I have to say I had a heart attack last January. And I'm sorry to say I gained weight, but nonetheless, one of the things I saw on PASUP, I think the little thing that was up on the board, I saw one of my favorite things is a pill bottle. I wish, I'm so ready. I have, like I said, I have worked with Clean Ways. I've talked, as you said, there is just a major gap. I donate to the Sierra Club. I went to the Conservation District. Every place I go, I say, oh, look at that extra plastic. It just doesn't. I am absolutely certain that things have to change at the top. But as far as groups go, I wish Dr. Wren or anybody, what is the problem with taking back pill bottles? It's just sickening. It's just ridiculous. I used to go to a private pharmacy, and what was weird, and then I'm all freaked out because I have all these meds because I had a heart attack and I don't even know any of them. I know them by color and shape, and then they change them on me, and then I'm all screwed up and all nervous wreck. But I used to go there, they would give them to me in a baggie. I'd say, I have no kids, no grandkids, there will be no problem. I am cool with a baggie. I would even take the baggie back and they would relabel it. How about that? But they have well, you know, COVID came, but I would just love it to see someone do something that's so representative of a simple change. What the WTF? Medicine bottles? I'm taking so many now. And it just, I'm so, you know what, I am almost so done. I'm almost like, I almost wanted to leave you guys in this meeting because I am so over fighting. I'm sit on a library board. I try and get them. They're like, there are people who look at me, don't tell me what to do. You're only sitting here and why don't you just buy tickets and give us money? You know, like I am so, I live in South Greensburg. We don't recycle. I am adjacent to Greensburg, the county seat, Westmoreland. We don't recycle. We change here. We are so red, and Trump is, anyways. Okay, that's all. I'd love to see.
Like Joanne.
What?
You mentioned my name, okay?
Okay.
I'm only one person. Thank goodness for the world for that. But let me tell you how this all started. I just got so grossed out by people using 2 or 3 styrofoam coffee cups at work that I went, this got to stop. So I started bringing on my own cup, and then I started thinking, well, this is only going to do a little bit. You know, we need more people involved, and it's not enough just to talk other people into not using them. We need to have public policy. We need to have, you know, better alternatives in the marketplace. So that's how I started. You are not helpless. You can say, hey, pharmacy, you know, how come we can't do this? You can write to the company. You can say, if you can find a place that's gonna take them back, you'll switch pharmacies. You can ask your doctor. You can, you know, really cause a lot of good trouble. Seriously. Oh, you're shaking your head. Where do you think?
I went to every other place I go to. Oh, we can't do that. Here's what I wish. I worked in healthcare. I worked in a long-term. I wish I had not retired. Dear God, they couldn't fire me. I was with the county. I wish, how about those styrofoam how about those styrofoam cups of ice water to the patients 3 times a day? Gee, I mean, here, I started work when we used to have, here, how about I started work before we, you know, before we had speech therapists, physical therapists, but the styrofoam, and I get it, there is no incentive for people to not use the cheapest thing. How about when they pass out these free meals and all those flimsy little plastic things? I'm like thinking, what? There is nobody here drinking water. What, Weight Watchers said you're going to get thin if you drink water? Shit, we're so obese. We don't need water. We need to go and get up, go and get a drink of water. I don't care if you stick your head under the faucet.
All right, how can we help Joanne, folks? We all start with like an aggravation. You
oh, you can't. Oh, you're wonderful people, and I'm so grateful.
You can call, let's say, if you have a little paper, call them. Why don't you write an article about medical waste? I mean, you can take this, you can own this, and you'll find so many people that will help you. What's happening to me is I feel I'm crowded.
Oh, doctor, when I had my heart attack, I should have called. They gave me here, you know, honestly, it takes I love the idea that you're going to do a checklist. I love the idea that you do it simple down to the person that's mopping the floor, that everybody understands. I took home so much plastic from the hospital that I didn't touch. I like wrote it on my thing, but you know, then COVID happened.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody wants to hear anything. How about when we have bag bans? You know, we were fighting about bag bans. Oh no, but Giant Eagle stopped. No, anyways, I'm sorry, doctor, you're right. I would support you people any way I can. I love you all.
But you can be part of this wonderful community that I know of. This is such a great community. Everybody's so supportive. I was gonna, I do like this crowd surfing. If you throw yourself out there, people will catch you and carry you. Have you not all had that experience, folks? I mean, it's such a wonderful community of people. And you don't have to feel like you're alone in your frustrations.
And now, Joanne,
go ahead.
With the pandemic, all of our meetings are on Zoom. So you can just join over.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself less and less effective, and I need to take care of my own personal business because I seem to work in the I have a negative effect, because where was Diane? When Diane said, like, I start opening, everybody like looks at me. They know my friends, I used to go to girls' weekend. My friends would like going like, shut her up. Everybody be hiding their bottled water. They'd be all hungover and stuff, drinking their bottled water. And they'd be like, here she comes, hide the bottled water, you know? No, but nobody changes. They still, anyways, zero waste. I love you. I'm leaving. Finish your business. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, boy, the half dozen here, huh? Do we want to
see someone so passionate about the topic?
What?
Yeah.
Good to see someone so passionate about the topic.
I don't think I'm getting over her that she
the plastic.
It doesn't seem. I don't know.
I think our original intent was for the steering committee members to hang around to sort of debrief. We seem to have lost some, but I guess, Lee and Simone, if you're wanting to stay on to talk about that, you're, more than welcome. But I don't know that we're going to have too much more discussion on our original topic after this point.
I guess we're going to meet on the 4th, right? Diane's
Yeah.
muted.
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up anything we have to. I'm half an hour late for dinner.
Oh, okay. Let's just wrap it up then. Right.
I just want to say that the news from the kitchen was my daughter and my husband said that was one of the better environmental events that they had seen. And I pressed why, and the response was twofold. New topic, yay Ed. So it was a new and fresh topic, which I think was really exciting. And we had really excellent panel members. So again, yay Ed. So
I'm excited about those students. Let's see what we can do to get them. Are they all in Anaisa's class or something? Or
no, Annie's is graduate. So
that's right, she has.
I think that's the most important thing is we had a fresh topic and good speakers, and I think we should keep along that vein. So was there something, Lee, since you're the outsider here from the steering committee, would you like to add so we can learn from what we did well and what we can work on?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I love the topic too. And I think I'd like to know what I can do, like what my business can do. And I just love the toolkit that you mentioned. I don't know exactly what would be in that toolkit, but and am I supposed to be talking about the topic or just?
I was just basically
an email about what you think your business might be able to do, and just kind of like so we can get to know you better and you us.
So my business is going to have green businesses. It's going to be a community platform. And I was thinking about the signs. I think maybe somehow, some way, maybe signs can be created. I'm usually pretty good with product design. Like that's something that I think is really cool that I've always been pretty good at, but I don't know. I'm just kind of overwhelmed today. So I'm sorry if I'm not making sense, but.
So, I think the best thing is to gather your thoughts and then reach out to us. And we're just going to decompress about this particular event. So if you have something to say about this event, that'd be great. Otherwise, please stay in contact.
Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, well, should we just sign off or what should we do?
So did anybody have some things that they think that any other points of, wow, we did this really new and differently that was great, or something that we saw this time that we need to improve on?
Why don't we think about it and talk about it on March 4th? I'm happy to stick around, but I'm not sure all of us really want to. Becca is done.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Yeah, I think
everybody.
You can talk on the 4th.
Okay. I'll put out a
really good job. Good job.
Put out a Zoom. Okay. All right. Bye.
Good turnout. See y'all.